Hello.
Hi, Shrishti. Hi.
Hi, Arushi.
We're just waiting for everyone to join in. So we'll start at 1:30 sharp.
Okay, sure. How many people are we expecting today?
So we have about 50 sign-ups for the session. And we've also opened up the session otherwise to the community. We send them in the link. So let's see how many show up.
Okay, sure.
Hi, Riya.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
That's all right. My pleasure. So how many people have you got tuning in today?
So for registrations, we got about 50 registrations, and then we also opened it up to the rest of the community. So just admitting everybody right now as they come in.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me know when you want to go.
Yeah. We'll just start in a couple more minutes. People are still coming in, so.
No problem.
All right, I think we can start now. People are still coming in, so they can just join whenever. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. We're really excited to kick off our COVIDpreneurs Speaker Series with Rhea and Shrishti, who joined us. Thank you so much, Rhea and Shrishti, for taking the time out of your busy schedules. I'm sure you have a lot of other things to do, but I'm really grateful that you were able to join us today. And I would just like to introduce Rhea and Shrishti to the audience a bit first. So Shrishti Sahu is an entrepreneur with a successful exit, previous startup acquired by NBFC in India. Now she's building her second startup, and she's also an angel investor. She's a managing partner at SSV, also active with angel networks such as Indian Angel Network and Angel List. She was previously with Facebook and startup programs and partnerships. So we're really excited to understand Shrishti's perspective on the investing scenario in India right now with the pandemic and how things are going, and also her experiences as an entrepreneur. Riya Mazundar Singhal is the founder and CEO of Ecoware, which is India's first and largest sustainable packaging company. She was awarded the Nari Shakti Puraskar, the highest civilian honor for women by the President of India. And she's also a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader and an Asia 21 Young Leader in 2019. The theme of this session, as most of you would be aware, is how an entrepreneur and investor are coping with the pandemic and the new normal that we're facing today. And we're hosting this in collaboration with AWIB, which is Ashoka Women in Business. So I also have my co-moderator Arya with me today, who will be moderating the session. So we're really excited to get started. And the first thing that I think most of our Ashoka community, like one of the questions that they had sent was, if you guys can just share your entrepreneurial journey with us, as in, you know, how you got started, Rhea and Shrishti, and then we can take it forward. So maybe Rhea can start off.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Arushi. Can you hear me all right?
You're audible.
Okay, great. So just by way of background, I'm actually a pharmacologist. I used to work for Pfizer in the UK, and I got married and I moved to India in 2009. I had sort of had enough of the pharma world, and I wanted to do something different. And, you know, I was really shocked to see the amount of plastics people were using when I moved here. That was not something I was used to seeing when I lived abroad. And I think the other thing that was unnatural to me was the fact that everyone threw all their waste in one dustbin, and we didn't actually have, I mean, till today, we really don't have any formal waste segregation, right? That happens. Or backward integrated systems to deal with waste. So the idea was that to create something that was, healthy for humanity as well as the planet. And India being a biomass-rich nation, we started, I started toying with the idea of using agri-waste, which is typically burnt and obviously causes severe air pollution in northern India, or that uses animal fodder, right? Sorry, and so we played around with leftover crops. So once a crop like wheat, rice, sugarcane was processed, we took the waste and we sort of played around with it and decided to create a range of tableware that would displace single-use plastic, and that's completely biodegradable and backyard biodegradable, right? So if you have access to a garden or a backyard, you dig a hole, you put our products in soil. Once they come in contact with soil, they start breaking down, and they break down completely in a period of 90 days. So the whole beauty of creating Ecoware was that, it didn't change it doesn't change the nutritional value of the food that you put in it, unlike synthetic plastics, and also that it's not going to sit in a landfill forever, right? And outlive you like a typical plastic product would. So I founded the company in 2009, and one of our largest clients was the Commonwealth Games in 2010. Gave us great launch back to the company, great, immense amount of confidence, and we just hit the ground running from there. And it's been an 11-year journey. You see our products anywhere where basically people are fed in mass and there is no washing up. So from the Indian Railways to airport food courts to restaurants such as Subway, Cinnabon, Haldiram, various large-scale office canteens. We retail as well, so offline and online on our own e-commerce platform, as well as Amazon. And obviously pre-COVID, we were, at concerts and a lot of outdoor festivals, because we've seen that a lot of that is now becoming zero waste. Also we export our products as far as South America and as close as Sri Lanka. Our guiding principles are very clear. One is that safety is very important. So, like I said, safe for us, safe for the planet. Second is to create impact in everything that we do. And we've done that in our three folds. So you've seen, in a positive society, social impact, environmental impact, and health impact. And obviously to be authentic. So we're very clear that there's a lot of greenwash out there. We want to be very different and stand out. And we're the real deal. So, we invest very heavily in certification, and every claim that we make for our product is backed by a global certification. And because we were the first people to start this industry in India, we've basically set the industry standard as well. So that's us in a nutshell.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. Shrishti, would love to hear about you as well.
Sure, Rishi. Thank you for having me here. First of all, I'd like to say that I love seeing women participants. These days, I'm fortunately participating in a lot of panels where I see a lot more women participants, so that's always very refreshing. So that's good to see. Happy to share a little bit about my background. As Arushi mentioned, I actually built a fintech company before, which was focused on lending in rural communities. So I don't know how many of you are aware, but there are lots of micro entrepreneurs that actually power the backbone of the Indian economy, which transact a lot or borrow a lot from lending institutions, which are based in those communities, right? But like most of this lending was happening through very inefficient processes. It was literally like agents from those NBFCs would go to those areas, write it down on paper as to how much deposits they'd taken for a day. Be it like 10,000 rupees, 20,000 rupees. So it was as broken as that. And, as an engineer, when I saw that problem, I was like, this is such a large scale, complex problem that needs to be addressed, right? Like there needs to be technology powering all these transactions that are happening on ground, which was just non-existent in the ecosystem at that point. And this might not be as relatable today because like now, obviously we've moved towards digitization and payments all happening online. but the scenario was very different 6-7 years ago. So actually more than that, almost 10 years ago. Sorry, I keep losing track of time. But so that company actually got acquired. This was right after demonetization, where one of the NBFC clients that we were working with made us an acquisition offer. And by then, 4 years into the journey, we'd got into a very decent scale and size as well. We had over like 5 lakh customer accounts. We were doing about 30 crores in terms of transaction volume every month on the platform. And about 400-500 agents of these lending institutions were using our platform. So for any fintech company at that stage, these numbers where, it was $5 million every month was a big number at that point. Now it's all about billions and trillions. But that was an acquisition offer that our team decided to take. It was a very lean team, literally 6 people right out of college, just wanted to build something. We're very excited to just plunge into entrepreneurship and wanted to discover as we grew. So we decided to take that up and, moved on to, then there were two primarily problems that I wanted to address. One was to learn how to build for massive scale, because I'd gotten a first-hand experience of doing that, but scale was something still that was needed to be learned from different models. And also, secondly, how to what makes startups investable. Because as an entrepreneur, when you're very focused on just building, you don't really sort of take a bird's eye view to really understand what are the needs of the ecosystem. How do investors actually think? If you really want to raise funding for your startup, do you even need funding in the first place, right? Do you want to be a venture-backed company or not? And those were some of the questions that as an entrepreneur, I'd always sort of faced, but never really had answers to, because, I had never gotten corporate life experience, so to speak. So, fortunately, I actually joined an investment team of Loomis Partners, which is a private equity fund, which was focused around supply chain and human capital as domains. So that was a great experience where I worked on certain deals that, we were able to invest in and also exit a few companies that were part of the Loomis portfolio. And then, I was headhunted for a role to lead startup programs for Facebook in India. So essentially leading as to how defining strategy for how Facebook works with startups in India. And across all the programs that I was sort of overlooking, there were about 700-800 startups at any point. And, having been on the entrepreneur's seat, I always knew that, I had to go back and jump into the action, because I was meeting all these incredible founders. And I knew how exciting it was to be a founder, right? Because of my experience previously. So, in December last year is when I took the plunge again, and I was like, okay, it's 3 years later, it's definitely time to build again. So that's where I am currently. What I'm doing right now is we actually have two entities. One is an investment arm, which is my entity called Swadharma Source Ventures, which has made 6 investments this year, primarily focused on B2B SaaS investments, and also 30% focus on consumer tech. So some of the companies that we've bagged have fortunately been followed on by the likes of Sequoia, Bloom, etc. So really marquee investors coming on board for those portfolio companies. And on the other side, the other venture that I was building is also 100 Hospitality. Where like hospitality as an industry got majorly hit, to say the least. But, as an entrepreneur, it was all about, like, I literally gave myself the first year to be very close to the customers that we wanted to build for, and just use this time to discover what are the needs of people in this industry specifically. So, we've got great clients, which are both startups and large companies, that we are helping through business development as a service, which essentially we want to build as a technology platform in the future. But right now, a lot of product building is going on, and like a lot of product development is happening. So that's where we are, and I'm happy to discuss any of these aspects more as we go along in the conversation.
Totally, absolutely. So yeah, Arya would take over now. She would.
Right. So given the current pandemic, how did your organizations react to this pandemic, and what's the new normal for your companies now? I think we could start with Rhea, and then Shrishti, you could go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Arya. So, I mean, obviously, we were locked down very suddenly, and it was very abrupt. And it was literally, 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, this lockdown was what was going to happen, kind of thing. So we fortunately we resumed our manufacturing in May, sorry. And when we were and when we locked down in March, we were all kind of gunning to close the financial year. We had a lot of containers going out, a lot of orders that were just suddenly abruptly stopped. So in May, we kind of picked up again. And for us, our focus has been to keep it lean, to keep our team safe, to keep our consumers safe, basically all our stakeholders, right? So safety has been very important. So we've kind of had to build in protocols to kind of protect ourselves and our consumers. And so we started that in May, and that obviously continued. As our business, we've kind of realized we've become very B2C, because we've seen a lot of consumers shop online. So typically a revenue channel like Amazon for us was, maybe about 6-7% of our revenue, and it's kind of shot up to like 40%. Because what we saw in the lockdown is that a lot of people started becoming home chefs, or didn't have domestic staff, or those even unfortunate to have COVID, like some of our friends were just like, look, we need to use disposables. Can you send some of your products our way? So we kind of basically saw this huge spike in online sales. And I think that in terms of our manufacturing, and I mean, we're still about so we're still 70% of our revenue now pre-COVID. But I think, once we started in May, we started by the 20th of May, we kind of got our feet kind of properly sunk in June. And July, like Q2 for us, we've just basically been in a good space. We've met our costs, we've made profit. Our teams, everyone's been safe. All our pending orders that we had to kind of pause in March all went out. And we're slowly seeing our larger B2B clients come back, like the railways, etc. now that as we unlock even further. So yeah, we're expecting a better Q3 and Q4 for us.
I'm happy to go next. So as an organization, I think, like Rhea said, it was primarily most important to us that all the stakeholders are safe, anyone who was interacting with us or our clients, because, in hospitality as well, when hotels started opening up for the first time, for example, or real estate developers started getting people into their facilities again for showings or anything, we needed to make sure that any process that was taking place was completely safe for anyone to be involved in it. So for example, if any of our clients was supplying to any hotels, our first priority was, are all the processes being followed, and how can we sort of automate that to keep these regular checks, not just during COVID, but also after COVID, right? Because I don't think hospitality as an industry will ever be the same again. You will need a lot of focus on safety, and consumers will demand that as well, right? Like consumers might not have thought of it till now, but if I'm going to a hotel or if I'm going to a restaurant now, I would want to know that all the procedures or processes are in place. So that's on the hospitality side. But on the investment side, it's been very interesting. I've been investing for a few years now, like almost 5-6 years, but I never invested in people without meeting them in person. And this year it just went all out of the window, right? Like so much of making investment decisions really depends on like meeting the person, seeing how they are, how they react to different situations, what their body language is, how they think on their feet, and all those things just had to be replaced or replicated and be done on Zoom calls, which I think was really hard in the beginning, especially because as a fund we wanted to be most active March till June, and unfortunately that was the time where everybody just didn't know how the valuations would get impacted. Most of the term sheets that we had made out before, they actually, some of the investors or co-investors backed out or were demanding like 30 to 50% cut in valuations. So that was a crazy time to go through. But now I definitely, on the investing side, we're seeing valuations come back to pre-COVID levels. On the deal activity side also, there are I think we've done more deals than we would have without COVID or like in an ordinary year. But I guess now we've just adapted to the process of decision making through Zoom and a lot of other conversations. So what primarily helps there is a lot of reference checks. While first you would only do a few, now, it has to be very, very thorough of like getting people to vouch for the teams that you're backing, because that is your prime example that you can use for any investment decisions right now. And also, giving a lot of decisions sometimes. So, sometimes entrepreneurs want to move very quickly and they would want to close the term sheet. They literally after the first call, they're like, okay, when can we get a term sheet, right? But unfortunately, the investing world can't work like that. So, we've just learned to be more disciplined with the investing process, where sometimes we just like to tell the entrepreneurs, hey, you maybe not ready right now, but do share your monthly updates with us on a regular basis. And, we will let you know if things change. And that's not to ghost entrepreneurs in any way or, disappear from their lives, but it's just about to be able to track the progress that the startups are making, and if they're able to keep up with what we have in terms of goals and milestones for them. So I guess that has definitely changed. And lastly, like we're going completely remote as an organization. We do have an office space that we use for certain meetings, but we've kept that to minimal right now, and most of our organization is remote and plans to be that way.
Wow, that's actually a lot of things which were very different from what I expected pre-COVID. So how successful is the remote strategy proving to be thus far into the pandemic and the lockdown? And how are you managing to keep organizational cultures alive at your respective companies?
I think Rhea can.
Sorry, could you just repeat that? I missed, suddenly my internet was unstable. That's another
Right, sure,
remote.
that's fine.
Downside of
that was actually the
remote
question.
work.
How is remote working proving to be for all of you, and how are you managing to keep organizational culture still alive at your companies through the online forum?
So I think, I'm not going to lie. I think I've reached a point of Zoom fatigue. I have 2 kids, and we're schooling on Zoom. I'm working on Zoom. And at the end of the day, my brain is fried. But I think, professionally, look, we obviously did a lot more on Zoom, I think, during the lockdown. But like I said, post-May, we've got our factory up and running. Our office is running. So we do have, who we need to have physically present. And we, I suppose, we communicate. So our factory is out in Greater Noida. Our head office is out in GK2 in Delhi. So we may not expose both units to each other all the time. So we interact with each other more on Zoom. But it's, I think we've just become more disciplined about it now. I think you've got in those slotted times, you've got how, and it's strangely just become just the new norm, I suppose. It is just that. And like Shruti said, is that we had like an investment thing happening and stuff like that as well. And it was just, you did so much on Zoom. And I think, yes, we are, even though that is becoming the new norm, we're certainly missing sitting across a conference table or that human interaction. I come from a sales background. Like, I miss being customer facing. Like, one of the joys of my job is to go to a client, to sit, to discuss, to understand what their needs are, and to actually create a solution for them. And I hate doing it on Zoom, and unfortunately that's what I have to do. But it is what it is for the moment.
Yeah, I think I echo everything that Rhea said. Zoom fatigue, I think it's real for all of us. But the other thing that I really like, which has happened during COVID, is that most of the startups that you're seeing these days are thinking tech first or digital first, where that might not have been the case before, right? So a lot of the decks that used to come to me for pitches before, they might not have defined their online strategy yet or direct to consumer model. And suddenly now, it's all about that. So like now the decks have completely shifted to that model. They're all trying to build a community, or they're trying to start engaging customers through conversations and like starting conversations about political issues or like different issues, just to keep their users and consumers engaged. So that is definitely, I think, good for the ecosystem overall, because it will accelerate our digital transformation, so to speak. That I think is fantastic in a lot of ways, because now entrepreneurs, you are seeing a lot of that learning DNA happening in the ecosystem, which might not have existed before. So you'll see more and more you'll see more expertise coming in the domains that you're building in. And also you will be able to see a lot of entrepreneurs that are attacking digital spaces, or sectors that might have seemed very far off, or like at least 10 years down the line, that all that has gotten accelerated, and you'll see that happening in the next 2 to 3 years. So I think that change has been very exciting for me overall. But yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned already, I miss being able to sit with entrepreneurs and actually brainstorm with them on their product roadmap right there in the meeting, versus doing it on Zoom and not having a whiteboard to do it on. And also, on the other hand, the fact is that now that we're all remote, and you have to go through the discovery process with your suppliers or your clients also, it becomes a lot harder, because you can't really have those a lot of those conversations actually were great because of the spontaneity or the serendipity that came in those conversations. Something that you wouldn't have expected to would happen in those conversations, and now that is very hard to replicate on Zoom. So we have to be very mindful of that, and maybe think of how to replicate that. But we're all work in progress and getting there, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things that I was also thinking while we both were talking about Zoom fatigue is that we would have hosted you on campus had this situation not been there. So we could have met you in person and, taken this forward. But anyway.
And what a good change that would have been, right? Actually
Yeah.
get out of our
Yeah, exactly. So Arushi, I was actually at your campus in February, I think.
Yeah.
So that was it. And I was like, oh gosh, it would have been so nice to be back out there again and to speak to everyone in person.
Yeah.
Definitely. So I have a couple of specific questions. So Rhea, I wanted to ask you, has it been a special challenge logistically for Ecoware during the pandemic? Because I'm sure there must be some changes that you would have had to make, right? So how has that been for you particularly? Because I'm sure a lot of others, you must have been able to take your services, obviously, like you said, your Amazon orders just went up and everything, your Amazon revenue. But how has it been a challenge logistically for you? So logistically, for us, Arushi, there have been basically, I think, 3 different types of challenges. One, so during the lockdown, obviously there was, the cross-border and the cross-state rules were always very different, right? So
yeah.
Even though the Ministry of Home Affairs sort of came out with this, this is what we will do, but then it depended on individual states and how they that was sort of the minimum benchmark, if you know what I mean, right? So a lot of states were stricter. There was a lot of restricted movement. For our large pan-India clients like Subway, for instance, we were supplying out of 600 stores. We did at least 60% of their stores. And it was like, okay, we can do here, but we can't do there. So getting material across borders was definitely a challenge. Second, when you look at the export market, even still today, it is very hard to get hold of containers. A lot of the containers that have gone have not come back. A lot of the containers that have come in are stranded at ports and not being cleared. So there is, the wait for an empty container is at least 4 weeks. And that's a huge impact on, shipping, because there is the actual shipping time and no one counted in the wait time for a container. And I think from an Amazon perspective, I think they themselves have had to really double up on their logistics, because now people are sitting at home and buying more. Like, we've had scheduling issues on Amazon because they've not been able to keep up with demand. So and it's been very unfortunate, because I could have 150 orders come in, but I only have scheduling slots for 70. And so I'm unable to fulfill orders. So we've been through a whole logistical nightmare. It is getting better, no doubt. I think people are, but people are making provisions, but it's not, obviously that also takes time. It's not going to happen immediately. I know, like, even with Amazon, we've been told that, look, guys, it's getting better, but you've got to be patient. You know, this could, and we're expecting it. We don't know what's going to happen during Diwali and Dussehra, because that's the festive time. People are going to buy even more. So what that's going to mean for us, and it's really hard because you're a small medium enterprise, right? And you've got this amazing amount of like demand coming in, but you can't fulfill it, and it's so frustrating. But yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm sure that's like a lot of useful input, because we have a lot of entrepreneurs on campus actually in Ashoka. So I'm sure some of them must be attending this session. So these questions I think would serve some use for them as well about the realities of what is going on ground right now. So Shrishti, I wanted to ask you, since you mentioned that, you're getting a lot of like people are just pivoting their ideas completely, going digital, and since you deal a lot with like tech companies, so what do you think is the ratio of like getting, do you think people are just mindlessly going tech, or, just trying to make their idea digital, even if it's not working? Like, do you think that's happening? Like, is there a pattern there?
I wouldn't say that, because mostly, the stage that I look at is pre-seed and seed. And at that stage, it is typically pre-product, pre-revenue. You don't really have a lot of strong signals. You don't have like balance sheets and like a lot of data to really rely on. That's why I was saying that, the customer discovery process or the product roadmap process used to be so so significant for us while making investment decisions, where you would typically meet the founders and, actually brainstorm where do you want to see the company in 5-10 years down the line. But now it's being disrupted in that sense. But I don't think that necessarily, that's bad, that tech is being forced in certain aspects, if that's what you were asking. I think overall, it's very healthy for the ecosystem, because like there are many startups across India, for example, like Rhea's as well, where, the demand has suddenly accelerated like crazy. And that's great for small, medium enterprises, because that will give a significant boost to the Indian economy and the GDP overall as well, right? So I think overall, the changes that are happening in how tech is digitizing a lot of processes and transformation, that is overall very healthy and was much needed in the Indian ecosystem. So I wouldn't say that it's being force-fit in any way. But I would say that the term AI is thrown around very loosely. Like that is like on everyone's pitch deck, even though they might not have any data or not be using any models or doing any sort of AI, right? So there are certain terms and jargon that you see a lot, but overall, I don't think from a tech perspective, like we're in a risky zone, or it's not unsafe in that sense.
Okay. That's hopeful. That's good to hear about. So, Rhea, one thing, we got a very interesting question from our community at Ashoka from a student, is that, as you've mentioned, that one of the biggest accomplishments of Ecoware was to convince the Indian Railways to switch to Ecoware trains. So which industry do you think next has to make a switch to biodegradable products? Like, according to you, which industry must make a switch?
Look, I think, Arushi, it's funny because someone asked me this question yesterday and said, which industry do you think should be next on, to be sustainable? I just think that there is, when we talk about, let me define sustainability, because I think it's a term that's used very loosely. For me, it basically means intergenerational well-being, right? So meeting our own needs currently without compromising future generations to do so. And I think that where we are today, the planet, guys, the planet's on fire. There is no longer priority list of 1, 2, 3. It is about this mass movement of awareness, of education. It is about individuals and communities moving from, what I call rampant consumerism to conscious consumerism. It is about every business basically moving from linear economy to a circular economy, creating impact in everything that you do, be it job creation, social, environmental. And I think it's also, and using your business as a platform for change, right? And I tell everyone this, is that sustainability in every way or form has to be seen as a opportunity. Whether you are an investor, whether you are a CEO, whether you are a consumer, the point is that if you have sustainable business models versus a company that doesn't, your business at any, in the next 5 to 10 years will always have more value, right? So that's how you've got to see this. It is value creation. And the point is that people need to focus on that triple bottom line. They need to realize that sustainability and profitability can go hand in hand. So yes, we've convinced the railways, but I still feel, and I think that, for us moving forward, we're always looking at the power of innovation, right? If we can convince the Indian Railways, what is the next biggest industry? Can we help reduce their plastic footprint? Is it e-commerce? Is it, the medical disposable industry? Like, what next, basically? Because India is a biomass-rich nation, and we can be feedstock agnostic. So there is no limit to this. And the point is that as an entrepreneur, we're always looking forward. We want to scale. We want to scale our solution. We want to scale our application. And we want to scale our impact. So, and I think that we all realize that single-use plastic is a global problem, and we're very clear that we want to be that global solution. So I would encourage anybody that is exposed to a lot of plastic or is using a lot of plastic to start thinking differently.
All right, that's amazing to hear about. So Shrishti, my question to you again from our community is this: I'm guessing the student is probably like an entrepreneur in the making or has an idea for themselves. So they're asking, you've built multiple startups from scratch. What is that one thing you think a startup needs to be successful, like that one X factor? And what criteria do you usually judge startups by as an investor?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, I think this one thing that I'm going to talk about is the most overlooked aspect, even though it's the most significant and defining aspect of any startup, and that is being as close to customers as possible. A lot of people actually, and you see that a lot with techies these days, sitting in their rooms, they'll build a killer product, they'll ship it over the weekend without having spoken to any consumers or potential users of that potential product. And they ship it and they get it out in the world, and suddenly they get frustrated. Why am I not able to raise funding for this idea, right? Why am I not able to establish those feedback loops that I need from customers? So essentially, if you're not close to the consumer or the user of your product, that's a very negative signal in our team's mind, because you need those, even though you might not have like years of like domain experience or like those deep domain expertise that a lot of investors look for. We don't look at quantity or years of experience, but we do look at what quality of insights can you bring to the table. How aware are you of what the customer needs actually are? How much time have you spent talking to consumers? How many calls have you done? How many conversations have you done? Or how much time have you just spoken to them and like try to dig very deep into what are you actually solving for? I think that is something that a lot of the noise in the ecosystem just like makes entrepreneurs forget that. And that is the most basic thing of building a business, right? Like without customers, you will never have a business for the long run. And going back to Ria's point of sustainability and profitability, while there is a lot of movement on conscious consumerism side as well, user behaviors and customers are evolving and changing. And digital transformation is bringing about a lot of new behaviors. So to be able to adapt and to be able to tune into what is actually happening on ground, so that you're not building for some problem that doesn't really exist or doesn't really need to be solved, or is it even a big enough problem to be solved? I think going back to customers is the most incredible thing that an entrepreneur or founder can really do. And most of the best founders, you'll see that even for example like Dipinder Goyal of Zomato, right? Like he will actually reply to tweets that people send to Zomato, because you need to hear what people are saying about your product or company. If you distance yourself as a founder from that messaging, and you think you're too important to really hear customer feedback, I think you lose the game in the long run. So that's I think. That's the
Definitely.
most important.
So one thing I would want to ask, following up on Shrishti's, like since you said the customer is at the end of the day the most important aspect of your business. So maybe if you both can just, like summarize what your experience has been from a human-centric point of view, in terms of reaching out to your customers during this time, during the pandemic, or, in this new normal. How has that been for you? So if you can just, give us a little idea into that. Um, so I think Arushi, like, I think from what the conversations we've had right from the start, I think safety has stayed on everyone's mind, right? Everyone's worried about, or like all their stakeholders, from their teams to their customers, etc. And so I think there have been a lot of conversations that have revolved around that and the reassurance. For any sort of new customers that have come on board or engaged with us, I think the conversations have been about, again, building trust through, certifications or whatever it is that we've kind of, we've got behind that, because we've, everyone has been, don't forget the lockdown happened very quickly. And, so everyone was just like, hang on, what? One of those little turtles or tortoises that kind of just go under the shell and then stay, then you don't know when to come out and you don't know what's waiting for you when you come out, right? So I think there's been a lot of relationship building, which has been important. There's been a lot of listening to address newer concerns, right? A lot of the restaurants we've seen have maybe typically been food court models. They've now gone into deliveries. They've changed their portion sizes because people aren't sharing food anymore. There have been newer challenges, I suppose, that the lockdown has brought that we've had to look at, address, and work hand in hand with our clients, basically, to find solutions. But I think, that's something that we, having been in this industry for 11 years, and I mean, I come, like I said, I come from a sales background. When I worked in pharmaceutical sales, I realized that there was nothing like a no-see customer. And there was always, if you took the time to listen and understand whatever their concerns are, you could create a win-win situation. So I think just by that nature of who we are, and that runs through the veins of the organization. So there's a lot of confidence and trust that we bring. And I think that has also attracted newer customers to us during this time as well. So yeah, I think, from my experience, that's what it's been like the last few months. Definitely.
Shrishti, would you want to add something?
Yeah.
Sure. So, in our business model, we work very closely with procurement teams of hospitality industry. So, for example, working with Marriott, Tajes, and their procurement teams directly to get suppliers and companies that we work with into those properties, right? And help them expand not only in India, but also US and Middle East. So, right now, while we're building the tech platform, like I mentioned, that product roadmap is evolving. The first and primarily the most important thing to me was staying as close to the suppliers as possible, and also the buyers on the procurement team side, right? Like on the procurement team side, a lot of processes had to be put in place that and like a lot of vendor auditing and management had to be done for these procurement teams. And on the supplier side, it was obviously like there was a lot of stress in terms of how will I be able to sustain myself, because that was obviously a scare in everyone's minds, with the hospitality industry getting so badly impacted, where they were not seeing any revenues. They knew when they would open up their doors. So, it was really critical to be as close to customers in that sense. And that's what we've tried to do. Our tech platform and roadmap has also evolved in that sense. So, earlier we weren't really thinking of building features like vendor auditing and vendor management, but those were something that we had to build in place. And, there's literally something that we've built, which is like vendor scoring or reviews, where you can actually see what kind of processes does a supplier have in place. Are they following the strictest regulations that are required for brands like Marriott, Tajes of the world? So those are some of the things that we did as well, in addition to what Rhea said.
All right. I just had a very, this is kind of a basic question, but what were some of the challenges that both of you faced in your entrepreneurial careers solely because you were women? Were there any challenges of that sort? So I think we could just go Rhea, Shrishti in the same order.
Oh, I hate playing the gender card, guys. But I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't easy. I moved to this country when I was 27, having never really lived here or in the city. Learned to navigate Delhi, learned to build a business, build a home, family, all that sort of stuff. And I think that to be taken seriously when you went into Chandni Chowk, Sadar Bazaar, like sitting with generational traders at the age of 27 is not easy. I think that even when we were working with the Commonwealth Games, etc., there were a lot of bullying tactics and techniques and things that were done to sort of said to phase you, by historical, like people who had been more, like who'd been there longer, basically in terms of vendors and all that sort of stuff. But and I think that I don't think investment has been very easy. We've been through phases where we've said, okay, let's look, let's not, let's see. And I think that in funding in women entrepreneurs, I think is a landscape I think that needs a serious amount of improvement. I don't know whether Shrishti agrees with me or not, but I think we need to see more women-led. We need to see more women investors. We need to see more women-led companies being invested in, and I think that those probably and I mean it's just are the standard gender issues. Like I can go into a government meeting and I can have the person I'm sitting across not even be able to look me in the eye and talk to me, like literally look out the window or look somewhere else, and I'm just like, this is really weird. And then I realized that, look, this is not about who I am. This is obviously just a cultural thing, and then it's fine, but it is a little awkward sometimes. But yeah, I think aside from that, I don't think there's been I wouldn't say it's been. I think there's general. For me, the challenge is there is general lack of awareness and lack of recognition for green-led businesses that are committed to positive impact and delivering on SDGs. And that those things are just not priorities at the moment, or not being recognized in the country, whether you're a man or a woman, really, to be honest. So yeah.
Great. Shrishti, anything else to add? How was your experiences with gender?
Well, so I've actually
is in a tech industry, like, so I really want to hear that perspective.
Yeah, sure. So I've actually had the fortune or misfortune of being on both sides as an entrepreneur and investor. And, sometimes it's as easy, sexist remarks can come as easy as being mistaken for being an EA on email threads when your co-founder is marked on them. And that's the most annoying and ridiculous thing. I'm not here to block your calendar. I'm the founder of the company, so talk to me that way. That I think that keeps happening. And, even during this time, especially because we weren't really meeting people face to face, and it was a lot of emailing and back and forth, people would just mistake me for being an EA of my co-founder. And I was like, where is this coming from, right? So it is as deep rooted as that, unfortunately. But what really brought me back from Facebook, because I was building the She Leads Tech program at Facebook, where it had scaled to 600 entrepreneurs across India. And, even though every year we keep moving the needle by like a percentage or two, back maybe 4 years before, it was about 2% of funding actually goes to women entrepreneurs. Now it's at about 4-5%. But come on, who are we kidding, right? Like, we're far away from that 50% gender equality that we want all of us to strive for. So I think we have a lot of work to do. But fortunately, these days I actually got invited to be on this group of like 250 plus women investors in India. And like before joining that group, I didn't even know that there were that many women investors. So, that group actually signals like a big positive change coming, because there are more women in investment teams and they are joining VC funds. So, hopefully they will go on to be partners and have leadership positions and be able to back women-led businesses, because women just stand women build businesses better. And I'm not saying that because of bias, but like a lot of the times where someone who might be pitching for sanitary pads, they might not be able to pitch to male VC as well as like a female investor would understand. So there are nuances like that, but I just hope that that time is close enough that I don't have to call myself a woman entrepreneur or a woman investor, and like I'm not written about it in that way also. But I think it's still unfortunately a long way to go.
That's fair. I do think you all just deserve to have the title of being one of the most amazing entrepreneurs or amazing investors without having gender attached to it. Another quick question I had was, how do you manage to stay optimistic about your businesses and works in such an uncertain time? How has it been into your personal experience? What's your personal opinion about that?
So I think, Arya, for me, when we locked down, I think my biggest concern was my workforce. Like we're 120 people team, out of which 90 people are labor, and out of which 30% are women. And I am my biggest thing was we need to pay salaries. We need to maintain their livelihood. And so it was that was sort of the hunger that drove me, if you want to call it that. And I think that, staying positive, it was like, okay, we are responsible for 120 people. Like at no point can you, as an entrepreneur, I don't think you have a Saturday, Sunday, or you have a moment to switch off, or it's not like that, because you have these many people that you're responsible for. And like I said, your team's just growing. So I think that was something that just kept us going. And it was, we were also at a time, I touched on funding. Like we were approached by an investor about a year ago now, and by April we were at the point of closing our SHA, and they tried to use COVID to change the valuation of the company. And I said no, and we walked away from that. And so to wake up the next morning and to kind of just pick yourself up and go, okay, right, what's next? But we've been fortunate. We've had a couple of grants this year. Like I said, I've touched on earlier as well, we've been in a position where we said we need to employ X, we need to meet X costs, and let's just manage that right now. Let's not be over ambitious, or we're not setting up another unit, or we're not scaling fivefold, etc. So I think our priorities have definitely changed. We've been very focused on that, on what our strategy is. And so yeah, I think my driving force has basically been my team.
Mm-hmm.
And the product that we've built. Ultimately, post-COVID, everyone's been worried about cross-infection. There is a huge advocacy to use disposables. And we firmly believe that a product like Ecoware is even more pertinent now in this new lockdown world. We don't want people to regress to using plastics when there are better alternatives available. So that's it, really.
That's still a lot of ways of adapting really quickly. And I think that actually captures the spirit of what we were talking about. Shrishti, how was it for you? How are you staying really pumped up about this?
I think, as a founder, there's just no other way to be. And when you take on the role of being a founder, it's literally about, I like to think of it, and there's this concept called something called servant leadership. Basically, the founder of the company is actually there to serve the people who are in the team, and also your customers and stakeholders. So you don't really think of yourself as the person who's guiding everything, but you're there serving everyone. And that, is a big perspective shift, which keeps bringing you back to like a vision or a mission, which is more deeply ingrained versus just something that, I want to have like a lot of power, status, money, fame. When you're driven by factors like that, it doesn't really fuel you in the long run. And just like being a founder, it just needs to be a lot more of like service, more about giving than taking. So I guess, as a founder, you just have no other option. You just have to be optimistic. You have to keep the team motivated. If you're feeling low, I always say that, it's best to be vulnerable and share everything openly with your team. But at the end of the day, you also need to be able to suck that poison out of that team that you were putting in, and take them to the next step or take them to the next milestone. So you have to keep doing that on a daily basis, and there's just no other way.
Yeah, definitely. So we got a question from Vedantika, who's attending the session right now, and she's asking if you have any advice for budding women entrepreneurs and how to actually get started. Like, that is literally the question.
So I think from, my perspective is I think that sometimes women have the habit of overthinking things. And I'm like, just stop. Like, I have friends who do this and I'm like, please, can we not discuss this anymore? Can you just go out and do it? Because I think the biggest injustice is not trying. And I think that as long as you keep learning, there is an evolving and you will always be moving forward, right? So a setback is never really a setback, or it's never deemed as a failure. And I think, the important thing is to keep trying. I think you've got to be very, very clear about what it is you want to do, and the impact that you want to create, because entrepreneurship can be very lonely. It can be very hard. Like Shrishti's also touched upon, is that you can, there are days where you've got to basically rile up that courage for your entire team, and you've got to guide them, and how you feel runs through your organization, right? And your values ultimately. So I think that, you've got to, I love this word in Hindi, which is himmat, because there is nothing else, I don't think confidence, and I think they just don't do justice. Like, you have to have this strength at like the core of your stomach to, be able to see yourself through all good and bad. So yeah.
I think that the word captured it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I'll just maybe start by saying that, I deal with both women entrepreneurs and male entrepreneurs. But, a lot of the times before women entrepreneurs start pitching to me, they like, is this something that I should be doing? Do you think this is the right idea for me to do? And, if you're coming on investor calls and you're so filled with self-doubt, I really can't help you after a certain point. Like, I'm not there to go through personal development with you. I want to be able to participate in the professional journey of building a startup with you, right? So that's just a different way of looking at it, where, sometimes men who might not really have anything concrete, they'll be like overconfident, very arrogant, and they'll be like, we've solved this for a very large market. And whereas women entrepreneurs who might have built something very wonderful and they've built actually a profitable company over the last few years, they'll come on the calls and be like very timid or not very confident, or not be very sure of themselves. And like, as women, like, let's be honest, we do tend to judge ourselves a lot. There is a lot of self-doubt, but as at least during those investor conversations, you need to have a mask on. You have to put a game face on, at least during those times. But when someone is thinking about starting a business, I think the best advice that I ever got, and my learning as an investor also, is that, is the market large enough, or is the total addressable market that you want to serve large enough? Because a lot of businesses that, sometimes might not really know that there is a need in this market and how big that is. So if you really first, when you really hone in on that idea that you want to build or solve for, first take a bird's eye view of what are the industry trends. Is this industry going to change in the next 2-3 years, or will your product even be needed 5 years down the line, or will it become redundant? So those are some of those things that you really need to consider. So market, customer, and obviously then how you want to build it and how you want to solve it. But to me, market and customer are the most important aspects to focus on when you're just starting out. And talk to as many people as possible, right? Get different perspectives. Let people poke holes in your idea. Like, I remember, like, when I was building my first company, I must have gotten like at least over 100 no's from VCs. And each conversation, I was just like, okay, you don't want to invest, but tell me why, so that I can go solve for that, right? But also, like, just know that sometimes, that advice is also misplaced, and they might just be not interested in doing you a favor, not investing in you. So don't take it very seriously, but you need to have those conversations several times to keep hearing different perspectives, because it makes your job easier in the long run. The more time you spend on the planning and discovery process, your job will be a lot easier in the longer run.
That's actually really great advice. I hope people here actually have something to take back from that. So we have another question for Rhea, which is from Pushpavali, and it is, we hear the term sustainable, organic, carbon neutral very loosely used to market and sell products. There's no product transparency of how a product is produced, distributed, etc. Do you believe that this is a problem? And if yes, how do you think this can be overcome?
So yes, I absolutely agree. I think there is a lot of terminology that's used very loosely. And I always basically, I think education is that an awareness basically as at the core of this. So I think the more we educate and the more we create awareness, and I think it's important. And that's not just because, like I said, at the start, there's a lot of greenwash from a lot of CSOs. You go into a Starbucks, and I'm saying, like, you see it in consumer products, you see it in people who are making purchase decisions. I took a Air Vistara flight pre-COVID, and I was really shocked to see OXO biodegradable cutlery being used, and they were like, oh yeah, we've gone green and we're eco-friendly. And I'm like, how is this eco-friendly? Like, because no one is thinking closed loop. Okay, we don't have industrial composting facilities. This is going to end up in a landfill and it's going to sit there. You go to a Starbucks, you pick up one of their cups, and at the bottom there's a small disclaimer that says, this is a compostable cup, but there might not be an industrial composting facility in your area. And you're like, yes, in my area, in this entire country, there is no industrial composting facility.
Yeah.
So I think that, organizations need to be more responsible about the products that they put out in the market. I think if we take a lot of pride. So we're very, we put all our certification out there. We make a huge noise about all of that, right? Because we're like, look, this is the stuff that you need to look out for. This is why it's genuine. This is how it's genuine. I think that, unfortunately, even from organizations like the FSSAI, etc., like the typical bodies that you would look at, in the F&B sector, there is really still nothing that is concrete, that guides products such as ours. So the onus is on you, and I think that you've got to then be a responsible manufacturer, especially if you're creating a consumer product. And I would challenge consumers to say, okay, you know what, if you're claiming this is biodegradable, show me, tell me how, what, because anyone who's cracked it will make a noise about it.
Right. Wow, that's actually a really interesting way to go about it, because it does boil down to the consumers at the end of the day.
Yeah,
definitely.
As a mom, Arya, I can tell you, like, we, when my kids were born, there was this whole thing about, the milk bottles that you get, they should be BPA free, right? They should be all of this. So, like, you're so careful about what you bring into your house and, how, etc. Like, even now when you eat salads, would you do a hydroponics? Would you do like regular?
Yeah.
There's just, so I would be a challenging consumer.
Right.
Yeah,
As we all should be.
definitely. Definitely. Thank you so much, Riya and Shrishti. We're already over time, and we've answered some of the questions we got from the community in general and right now as well. And it's been a great conversation. We hope that you also enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. I know I took a lot from it, so I hope you guys did too. If any closing remarks, if either of you have, would love to take that.
No, I just want to say thank you once again. I think this is a fantastic platform. I think I don't see the impact of COVID being gender neutral. So like Shrishti in her opening comment said, it's amazing to see so many women out here. And I think the power of network is very important, especially in a time like now. And I hope that you guys keep growing and keep getting amazing, inspirational people to speak to everyone. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Shrishti, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, thanks, Arushi, for having me here. I think it was a great conversation. And again, I think if even 2 or 3 people out of this group are inspired enough to start their own businesses or think of investing as a career, I think would have been a very successful session. So I hope everybody had some good takeaways and insights from our conversation today. And good luck to all of you to build more sessions like this.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to everyone who attended. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.